The history of the British Isles begins almost a million years ago, with the first human presence in what is now England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. Archaeological evidence shows that early hominins, likely Homo heidelbergensis, were present in southern England by approximately 800,000 BC. These early humans were hunter-gatherers, relying on basic stone tools for survival and moving in small, mobile groups. Over tens of thousands of years, human presence in the islands fluctuated with climatic conditions, particularly during the repeated glacial and interglacial periods of the Pleistocene epoch. Northern Europe, including Britain, experienced harsh ice ages that periodically forced human populations southwards, while warmer interglacial periods allowed repopulation and adaptation to new environments. By the Middle Paleolithic, roughly 400,000 BC to 40,000 BC, Neanderthals occupied parts of Britain, leaving evidence of sophisticated flint tools and hunting practices. Archaeological sites, such as Boxgrove in Sussex, show that these early humans hunted large mammals, including horses and deer, and may have used fire. Neanderthals were eventually replaced or assimilated by Homo sapiens during the Upper Paleolithic, around 40,000 BC, coinciding with the last ice age. These modern humans brought new tool technologies, art forms, and social organization, laying the foundations for future societies. After the retreat of the glaciers, around 10,000 BC, the Mesolithic period began. Human groups spread across the newly habitable landscapes of Britain, which at the time were still connected to continental Europe via the land bridge known as Doggerland. Mesolithic communities were hunter-gatherers, exploiting both terrestrial and aquatic resources. They constructed temporary shelters and used microliths, small flint tools designed for hunting, fishing, and processing food. These early societies were organized in small bands, moving seasonally to follow game and gather plants. Archaeological evidence of shell middens, post holes, and stone tools provides insight into their subsistence strategies and mobility patterns. The Neolithic period, approximately 4000 to 2500 BC, marked a major transformation in the British Isles as farming was introduced, likely influenced by migrations from continental Europe. Communities transitioned from nomadic hunting to settled agriculture, cultivating wheat, barley, and legumes, and domesticating animals such as cattle, sheep, and pigs. This period also saw the development of pottery for storage and cooking. One of the most notable achievements of the Neolithic era is Stonehenge, constructed in multiple phases between 3000 BC and 2000 BC. Stone circles, hengests, and burial mounds appeared throughout Britain and Ireland, indicating complex social and religious practices. These monuments required coordinated labor and knowledge of astronomy, engineering, and logistics, demonstrating a significant level of societal organization. The Bronze Age, roughly 2500 to 800 BC, introduced metalworking to Britain. Bronze tools, weapons, and ornaments replaced stone implements, enabling more efficient agriculture, warfare, and craftsmanship. Long-distance trade networks developed, linking Britain with continental Europe, particularly for the exchange of tin and copper necessary to produce bronze. Burial practices became increasingly elaborate, with barrows and cairns marking the graves of elite individuals. Social stratification emerged, as evidenced by grave goods and the scale of ceremonial constructions, reflecting the rise of regional elites and hierarchical communities. The Iron Age, approximately 800 BC to 43 CE, saw the arrival of Celtic culture in the British Isles. Iron tools and weapons allowed for greater agricultural productivity, defensive construction, and warfare. Hill forts, such as Maiden Castle in Dorset and Danbury in Hampshire, were constructed across southern Britain, serving as fortified settlements and centers of regional power. Tribal kingdoms dominated the landscape, with complex networks of alliances and rivalries. Celtic societies were organized around clans and tribes, with Druids playing key roles in religion, law, and education. Art and metalwork flourished, including decorated swords, jewelry, and ceremonial items, demonstrating both craftsmanship and cultural identity. The political and cultural landscape of Britain was permanently altered in 43 CE with the Roman invasion under Emperor Claudius. This began the period known as Roman Britain, which lasted until 410 CE. Roman administration established towns, roads, aqueducts, and Hadrian's Wall, imposing a degree of urbanization and centralized governance previously unknown in the islands. Roman Britain became integrated into the wider Roman economy, facilitating trade in goods such as pottery, metals, textiles, and agricultural produce. Roman law, infrastructure, and military presence profoundly influenced local societies, although areas in northern Scotland and western Wales remained largely unconquered and independent. The withdrawal of Roman forces around 410 CE left Britain fragmented, setting the stage for Anglo-Saxon migrations and the formation of new kingdoms. The Anglo-Saxon period, beginning in the 5th century, introduced new kingdoms and cultural practices, including early Germanic languages, law codes, and Christianization. Augustine of Canterbury's mission in 597 CE brought the Roman Church to England, establishing monasteries and literacy centers. Viking incursions beginning in the late 8th century led to the creation of the Danelaw in eastern England by the 9th century. Figures such as Alfred the Great of Wessex, 871 to 899, defended the kingdom against Viking conquest while implementing legal, military, and educational reforms. His grandson, Athelstan, 924 to 939, became the first ruler of a unified England, consolidating political authority across multiple kingdoms. The medieval period from 1066 to 1485 included the Norman conquest, led by William the Conqueror, which reshaped English society, introducing feudal governance and a centralized monarchy. The Domesday Book, 1086, recorded landholding, taxation, and administration, reflecting the organizational reach of the Normans. Plantagenet kings presided over events such as the Magna Carta, 1215, the Hundred Years' War, 1337 to 1453, and the internal conflicts of the Wars of the Roses, 1455 to 1487. These centuries established the monarchy, legal systems, and aristocratic structures that would endure into the early modern period. The Tudor period, 1485 to 1603, saw the resolution of the Wars of the Roses, the establishment of the Tudor dynasty, and profound religious change. Henry VIII's break with Rome, 1534, created the Church of England, dissolving monasteries and redistributing wealth and land. His children Edward VI and Mary I alternately advanced Protestantism and restored Catholicism, culminating in the reign of Elizabeth I, who stabilized religious divisions, defeated the Spanish Armada, 1588, and promoted exploration, commerce, and cultural achievement. The Stuart period, 1603 to 1714, included the union of the crowns under James I, the English Civil War, 1642 to 1651, the execution of Charles I, and the Commonwealth under Oliver Cromwell, the restoration of Charles II, 1660, and the Glorious Revolution, 1688, with William and Mary established parliamentary supremacy and constitutional monarchy. The Act of Union with Scotland in 1707 created the Kingdom of Great Britain, consolidating political authority across the islands. The Georgian era, 1714 to 1837, was marked by industrialization, colonial expansion, and political consolidation under the Hanoverian kings. Jacobite uprisings, 1715, 1745, challenged the new regime but failed, while Britain fought the Napoleonic Wars, 1793 to 1815, and established global influence. Industrialization transformed urban life, manufacturing, and transport, laying the groundwork for modern Britain. Queen Victoria's reign, 1837 to 1901, oversaw the height of industrialization and imperial expansion, with reforms addressing labor, education, and public health. Britain became the world's leading industrial, naval, and colonial power, influencing global culture and economics. The 20th century saw Britain engage in two world wars, the decline of the empire, the independence of Ireland, and the development of the welfare state. The 21st century has been characterized by political devolution, economic globalization, and events such as Brexit, shaping Britain as a complex, post-industrial society. This documentary provides a continuous, historically precise account of the British Isles, tracing human presence, societal evolution, political change, and cultural development from 800,000 BC to the present, establishing the context for each subsequent period of the island's long and complex history. The history of human habitation in the British Isles begins in the Lower Paleolithic, around 800,000 BC, when early hominins, most likely Homo heidelbergensis, entered the southern regions of what is now England. Archaeological evidence at sites such as Haysborough in Norfolk indicates the presence of stone tools and animal remains, demonstrating that these early humans were capable of organized hunting and butchering. These populations were highly mobile, moving seasonally across the landscape in small bands to exploit resources, including large mammals such as deer, horses, and aurochs. Their stone tools, typically hand axes made from flint or quartzite, represent the Acheulean technology, which was widespread across Europe and Africa at the time. Climatic fluctuations during the Pleistocene epoch led to repeated periods of glaciation and interglacial warmth, influencing patterns of habitation. During glacial periods, much of northern Britain was covered by ice sheets, forcing human groups to migrate southwards, while during interglacial periods, populations expanded northwards, taking advantage of forests, rivers, and coastal environments. By approximately 400,000 BC, Britain was inhabited by Neanderthals, whose presence is evidenced at sites such as Swanscombe in Kent. Neanderthals displayed more advanced stone tool technologies, including Mysterian flint implements, designed for cutting, scraping, and hunting purposes. They also show early evidence of controlling fire, providing warmth, cooking capabilities, and protection against predators. Neanderthals occupied temporary campsites in river valleys and coastal plains, exploiting both large and small game. Their skeletal remains suggest robust physiques adapted to cold climates, and there is some evidence that Neanderthals may have engaged in symbolic or ritual behavior, although this remains debated. Neanderthal populations in Britain were periodically disrupted by environmental change, and by 40,000 BC, modern humans, Homo sapiens, entered the region. The arrival of Homo sapiens marked the Upper Paleolithic period, approximately 40,000 to 10,000 BC, coinciding with the last glacial maximum. These modern humans introduced blades and composite tools, including bone and antler implements, improving efficiency in hunting and daily tasks. They exploited a wide range of ecological niches, including upland forests, river valleys, and coastal areas. Artifacts from this period demonstrate increased technological sophistication, with evidence of personal ornamentation, such as beads and carved figurines, indicating a degree of cultural complexity. Populations remained sparse, with small, mobile bands adapting to the extreme climatic conditions of late Pleistocene Britain. Following the retreat of the ice sheets around 10,000 BC, the Mesolithic period began. Britain was no longer physically connected to continental Europe after rising sea levels created the English Channel and North Sea, isolating human populations from the continent. Mesolithic hunter-gatherers relied on hunting, fishing, and gathering for subsistence. They constructed temporary shelters, often near rivers, lakes, or coasts, and used tools such as microliths, small flint blades fitted into wooden or bone handles for composite tools. Evidence from sites such as Starcar in North Yorkshire indicates that these communities exploited both terrestrial and aquatic resources, including red deer, aurochs, wild boar, fish, and shellfish. Mesolithic populations demonstrated advanced planning, constructing platforms over wetlands and utilizing barbed points for fishing, indicating adaptation to diverse environments. Seasonal movements allowed groups to track the availability of resources, while burial practices suggest the development of social structures and ritual behavior. The Neolithic period, approximately 400 to 2500 BC, marked a fundamental transformation in the British Isles. Agriculture was introduced from continental Europe, possibly through migration or the diffusion of ideas, leading to the domestication of plants such as wheat and barley and animals, including cattle, sheep, and pigs. Permanent settlements emerged as communities began to cultivate fields and manage livestock in one location. Pottery production became widespread, facilitating storage, cooking, and ceremonial functions. Neolithic societies constructed large communal monuments, most notably Stonehenge, which was built in stages between 300 and 2000 BC. Stone circles, hengests, and long barrows appeared across Britain and Ireland, demonstrating complex social organization, coordinated labor, and knowledge of astronomy and engineering. These monuments served ceremonial, religious, and burial purposes, reflecting hierarchical social structures and emerging political organization. Archaeological evidence indicates the use of polished stone axes for forest clearance, sophisticated flint tools for domestic and ritual purposes, and trade networks for materials such as jadeite and greenstone, sourced from continental Europe. The Bronze Age, approximately 2500 to 800 BC, introduced metallurgy to the British Isles, transforming technology, society, and trade. The production of bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, enabled the creation of stronger tools, weapons, and ornaments, allowing for more effective farming, construction, and warfare. Settlements expanded in size and complexity, with evidence of roundhouses, fortified enclosures, and field systems. Long-distance trade networks developed, linking Britain with continental Europe, particularly for the supply of tin, essential for bronze production. Burial practices became increasingly elaborate, with barrows, cairns, and cists marking the graves of elite individuals. Grave goods included weapons, jewelry, and pottery, reflecting social stratification and regional power structures. Hilltop enclosures and defensive works indicate both territorial control and the organization of labor at a community level. Artistic styles, such as the beaker culture, spread across Britain, introducing characteristic pottery and metalwork, signifying cultural exchange with continental Europe. The Iron Age, approximately 800 BC to 43 CE, brought further technological, social, and political changes. The introduction of iron enabled the production of stronger tools and weapons, facilitating agriculture, construction, and conflict. Celtic culture became dominant, with tribal societies organizing into kingdoms or chiefdoms. Hill forts, such as Maiden Castle in Dorset, Danbury in Hampshire, and Eildon Hill in Scotland, served as fortified settlements, administrative centers, and symbols of power. These structures often included complex defensive works, such as ditches, ramparts, and palisades, reflecting concerns over intertribal warfare and defense against external threats. Celtic societies were structured around clans and tribes, with leadership often vested in chieftains and councils of elders. Druids, as religious and legal authorities, presided over rituals, education, and dispute resolution, playing a central role in governance. Settlement patterns varied, including dispersed farmsteads, defended hilltop communities, and open villages. Agriculture, based on the cultivation of cereals and the raising of livestock, supported increasing population density, while metalwork and craft production contributed to economic complexity. Trade, both within Britain and with continental Europe, brought luxury goods, such as imported pottery, gold ornaments, and specialized tools, indicating a network of exchange and cultural interaction. Religious and ceremonial practices in the Iron Age were diverse. Sacred sites, such as rivers, springs, and groves, were used for offerings and ritual activities. Hoards of metal objects, often intentionally deposited, suggest beliefs in supernatural forces or social display. Art and ornamentation, including torques, bracelets, and decorated weaponry, demonstrate both aesthetic sensibilities and indicators of status. Communities were politically autonomous but interacted through alliances, warfare, and trade, creating a dynamic and interconnected landscape. By the early 1st century CE, Britain was a collection of tribal societies with varying levels of political cohesion. In southern and eastern regions, tribes such as the Catavalani, Atrebates, and Trinovans developed centralized power bases and fortifications. These societies were aware of Roman civilization through trade and diplomacy, and some sought alliances with continental powers. Northern and western regions, including Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, remained largely independent, with less evidence of centralized authority but significant cultural complexity. The arrival of the Romans in 43 CE under Emperor Claudius marked the transition from prehistoric and Iron Age Britain to Roman Britain. The invasion was prompted by political and economic factors, including internal power struggles among southern tribes and the desire of Rome to expand its influence. Roman forces systematically conquered southern and eastern Britain, establishing provinces, roads, towns, and fortifications. While northern regions, particularly Caledonia, modern Scotland, resisted conquest, Roman occupation brought new technologies, administrative systems, urbanization, and integration into the broader Roman economy. The Roman period also facilitated cultural exchange, the introduction of writing, and exposure to Mediterranean architectural, legal, and technological practices. Throughout the prehistoric period, from the first hominins to the Iron Age, the British Isles underwent significant climatic, environmental, and cultural transformations. Population size fluctuated according to climate, resources, and technology, while social complexity increased steadily, from small bands of hunter-gatherers to organized tribal kingdoms with hierarchical leadership. Human activity altered the landscape through deforestation, agriculture, settlement construction, and metalworking. Trade networks expanded over time, connecting Britain with continental Europe and facilitating the movement of goods, technologies, and cultural practices. By the 1st century CE, Britain was prepared for incorporation into the Roman world, both politically and economically, setting the stage for the next phase of its history. The period of Roman Britain begins in 43 AD, with the invasion initiated under Emperor Claudius, marking the first substantial and sustained Roman military and administrative presence in the British Isles. While prior interactions between Rome and Britain occurred through trade, diplomatic missions, and occasional military expeditions during the late Republic, the Claudian invasion represented a deliberate campaign to integrate Britain into the Roman Empire. The Roman army, comprising legionaries, auxiliaries, and naval support, landed along the southern coast of England, with initial operations focused on subduing the tribal confederations in the southeast. The primary opponents in this region included the Cativalani, led by King Caratacus, and the Trinovants. The initial invasion combined a strategy of direct military engagement and the establishment of alliances with local tribes willing to submit to Roman authority. Roads such as Watling Street, Fosse Way, and Ermine Street allowed the rapid deployment of troops and the efficient movement of trade goods, reinforcing Roman control across the province. Urban development was a central feature of Roman Britain. Towns such as Londinium, modern London, Verulamium, modern St. Albans, and Camulodunum, modern Colchester, were established as administrative, economic, and military centers. These towns were laid out according to Roman urban planning principles, including grid streets, forums, temples, public baths, and amphitheaters. The towns served as hubs for governance, trade, and cultural integration, facilitating the Romanization of the local population. Roman villas in rural areas demonstrated the adoption of Roman architectural, agricultural, and domestic practices, reflecting both elite status and the diffusion of Roman culture. Roman administration in Britain was highly structured. Initially governed by a legatus Augusti, the province was organized into smaller administrative units under procurators and military commanders. Provincial governance involved taxation, census-taking, and regulation of local communities, with Roman law applied to both settlers and local populations. Latin became the language of administration, and the introduction of Roman legal principles shaped dispute resolution, property rights, and social organization. Roman influence extended to local elites, who were co-opted into the system through client kingships, civic titles, and participation in governance, integrating local leaders into the imperial hierarchy. The Roman military presence was crucial to maintaining control, particularly in the northern and western regions, which resisted integration. In 122 AD, under Emperor Hadrian, construction of Hadrian's Wall commenced, spanning approximately 73 miles across northern England from the River Tyne to the Solway Firth. The wall was garrisoned by auxiliary units drawn from various provinces of the Roman Empire, providing security against incursions by northern tribes such as the Caledonians. Later, during the reign of Antoninus Pius, 138 to 161 AD, a second frontier, the Antonine Wall, was constructed across central Scotland, though it was held only briefly before being abandoned in favor of Hadrian's Wall. Economically, Roman Britain was integrated into the broader imperial system. Agricultural production was intensified, with cereal cultivation, livestock husbandry, and specialized crops supplying both local consumption and export to continental markets. Mining operations extracted lead, tin, copper, iron, and silver, contributing to the Roman economy and technological advancement. Britain became a source of luxury goods, including grain, hides, and hunting trophies, as well as a market for imported items such as wine, olive oil, pottery, glassware, and textiles. Ports, rivers, and roads facilitated the movement of goods, connecting Britain to Gaul, Germania, and the Mediterranean. Cultural integration occurred gradually. Roman religion, architecture, and artistic conventions influenced indigenous communities. Temples, shrines, and religious iconography reflected the introduction of Roman deities alongside the persistence of local cults. Public entertainment, including amphitheaters, circuses, and baths, was introduced to urban centers, supporting both civic life and social cohesion. Education and literacy expanded within elite circles, and inscriptions in Latin provide evidence of civic administration, religious dedications, and commemoration of individuals. Over time, a Romanized elite emerged, adopting Roman naming conventions, clothing styles, and domestic practices, though rural areas retained many traditional cultural elements. Resistance to Roman rule persisted throughout the occupation. One of the most significant rebellions occurred in 60 to 61 AD, led by Boudica, queen of the Iceni tribe in modern Norfolk and Suffolk. Boudica's forces attacked Camulodunum, Londinium, and Verulamium, destroying Roman settlements and inflicting significant casualties. The rebellion was eventually suppressed by Roman legions under Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, demonstrating both the resilience of local resistance and the capacity of Roman military organization. Other localized uprisings occurred throughout the province, including in Wales and northern England, reflecting the uneven nature of Roman control. The northern and western regions of Britain, including modern Scotland, Wales, and parts of Ireland, remained less fully incorporated. Tribal societies in these areas maintained autonomy and resisted Roman administration, requiring ongoing military campaigns and fortifications to secure borders. Roman campaigns, particularly under governors such as Agricola, 78 to 84 AD, extended temporary control into Caledonia, including the construction of forts and roads. These operations established a limited Roman presence and facilitated trade and diplomacy, but full conquest was never achieved. The Roman military presence, including auxiliary units recruited from across the empire, introduced diverse populations, practices, and technologies, further influencing local societies. Public health, engineering, and technology advanced under Roman rule. Aqueducts, drainage systems, and baths improved sanitation and urban life. Roman engineering skills facilitated the construction of roads, bridges, and fortifications, enabling efficient military and economic operations. Agricultural techniques, including plowing, irrigation, and storage methods, increased productivity and supported larger populations. Artisans and craftsmen produced pottery, metalwork, and luxury items, reflecting both Roman and local tastes. The withdrawal of Roman forces from Britain began in the early 5th century. By 410 AD, the Roman administration could no longer sustain its military presence due to pressures from Germanic invasions, internal instability, and resource constraints within the empire. The Emperor Honorius formally instructed provincial leaders to defend themselves, effectively ending centralized Roman authority in Britain. Urban centers, villas, and infrastructure remained, but governance fragmented, leaving Britain politically and militarily vulnerable. Trade and communication networks declined, and local communities assumed responsibility for defense and administration. The departure of the Romans did not immediately eliminate Roman influence. Roads, buildings, legal frameworks, and cultural practices persisted, forming the foundation for the post-Roman period. The Roman occupation left enduring impacts on the British Isles. Urban planning, roads, architecture, agriculture, and administration provided structures that subsequent societies, including the Anglo-Saxons, would adapt. The introduction of Roman law, taxation systems, and civic organization influenced governance practices for centuries. Roman material culture, including coins, pottery, and tools, continued to circulate and be repurposed in post-Roman Britain. The Roman period also shaped settlement patterns, with towns such as Londinium evolving into medieval and modern urban centers. By 410 AD, Britain consisted of multiple post-Roman communities, often led by local elites, with regional variation in political organization, economic activity, and social structures. The departure of the Roman administration created a power vacuum, enabling migrations of Germanic peoples from continental Europe, including Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. These migrations initiated the early medieval period, which would see the formation of new kingdoms, the spread of Christianity, and the eventual consolidation of England. Roman Britain represented a period of intensive cultural, political, and economic transformation, linking the British Isles to the broader Mediterranean and European world. The province experienced urbanization, military organization, technological advancement, and integration into imperial trade networks. Roman administration imposed systems of law, taxation, and civic governance, while local elites adopted Roman customs and material culture. At the same time, resistance and partial autonomy in northern and western regions demonstrated the persistence of indigenous societies. The end of Roman authority left Britain fragmented but structured, prepared for the complex developments of the post-Roman and Anglo-Saxon eras. Following the withdrawal of Roman forces in 410 AD, Britain entered a period of political fragmentation and cultural transformation. The departure of centralized Roman authority left urban centers, infrastructure, and administration in place, but without imperial support. Local Romano-British elites assumed control over towns, fortifications, and surrounding territories, adapting Roman governance structures to meet local needs. Agricultural production, urban maintenance, and trade persisted, though the scale of long-distance commerce declined compared with the Roman period. Britain's population faced threats from Pictish raids in the north and from migratory groups on the continent, leading to localized instability. Into this environment arrived the Anglo-Saxons, Germanic peoples primarily from the regions of modern-day northern Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands. The earliest migrations began in the 5th century, with increasing settlement through the 6th century. Groups such as the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes established permanent settlements, often displacing or assimilating local Romano-British populations. These migrations were facilitated by the vacated Roman towns, fertile farmland, and navigable rivers, which allowed settlement and cultivation. Archaeological evidence indicates a gradual establishment of rural villages, timber halls, and fortified enclosures, forming the basis of emerging Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. By the mid-6th century, a number of Anglo-Saxon kingdoms had become established, collectively known as the Heptarchy. These included Northumbria in the north, Mercia in the central Midlands, East Anglia, Wessex in the south, Sussex, Kent, and Essex. Each kingdom operated independently, with local kings exercising military, judicial, and religious authority. Political boundaries were fluid, with frequent conflicts over territory and resources. Leadership was often based on dynastic succession, supported by warbands of warriors bound to their lord through loyalty and reward. Kingship was complemented by councils of nobles and advisors, and law codes began to develop, combining customary Germanic law with residual Roman legal traditions. Christianity was reintroduced to Anglo-Saxon England in the late 6th century. The mission of Augustine of Canterbury in 597 AD, sent by Pope Gregory I, established the framework for conversion in the Kingdom of Kent, where King Ethelbert accepted baptism. Augustine became the first Archbishop of Canterbury, establishing a structured ecclesiastical hierarchy and founding monasteries that became centers of learning, literacy, and administration. Christianization spread gradually through the 7th and 8th centuries, with notable centers such as Lindisfarne, Jarrow, and Whitby in Northumbria, and Gloucester and Canterbury in southern England. Monasteries functioned as repositories of knowledge, producing manuscripts, chronicles, and theological texts, including the Venerable Bede's Ecclesiastical History of the English People, completed 731 AD, which provides a detailed account of the early medieval period. In the 8th century, Britain faced a new challenge with the onset of Viking raids. Scandinavian seafarers, primarily from modern Norway, Denmark, and Sweden, initiated coastal attacks on monasteries, towns, and settlements. These raids were initially seasonal and opportunistic, targeting wealth stored in religious centers, including precious metals, manuscripts, and livestock. Monasteries, often poorly defended, were particularly vulnerable. In 793 AD, the attack on Lindisfarne marked the beginning of the Viking Age in Britain, demonstrating the reach and organizational capacity of Scandinavian raiders. Viking incursions intensified in the 9th century, evolving from raids into permanent settlement in eastern and northern England. The region known as the Danelaw, established following treaties and conquests in the mid-9th century, covered much of eastern and northern England, including modern Yorkshire, East Anglia, and the East Midlands. Scandinavian settlers introduced their own legal systems, agricultural practices, and material culture while integrating with existing Anglo-Saxon populations. Towns such as York, Jorvik, became significant economic and administrative centers under Viking control, with markets, workshops, and maritime trade linking Britain to the wider North Sea and Baltic economies. During this period, Alfred the Great of Wessex, 871 to 899, emerged as a central figure in the defense and consolidation of Anglo-Saxon England. Alfred successfully resisted Viking advances, achieving military victories and fortifying key locations. He implemented a network of fortified towns designed to defend against raiders, alongside a reorganized militia system capable of rapid deployment. Alfred also emphasized legal and educational reform, commissioning the codification of law codes and promoting literacy in Old English. He translated and adapted Latin texts on history, theology, and military strategy, establishing a foundation for governance and cultural continuity. Alfred's reign consolidated Wessex as the dominant power in southern England, providing a framework for the eventual unification of England. Following Alfred, his successors continued to consolidate control and resist Viking influence. His grandson, Aethelstan, 924 to 939, is recognized as the first king to rule a unified England. Aethelstan extended authority over multiple Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, exerting influence over Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, and Wessex. His reign included military campaigns against northern and western groups, diplomatic engagements with continental Europe, and the establishment of centralized legal and administrative structures. Aethelstan's governance emphasized the integration of diverse populations, including Anglo-Saxons, remaining Romano-British communities, and Scandinavian settlers within the Danelaw. Political and social structures continued to evolve in the 10th and early 11th centuries. Kingship was reinforced through the establishment of shires, each administered by an alderman and supported by a network of local officials, including reeves and thanes, responsible for taxation, justice, and military service. Legal codes were standardized across kingdoms, incorporating customary law, royal decrees, and ecclesiastical influence. Monasteries continued to serve as centers of learning, record-keeping, and literacy, producing chronicles such as the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which provides a year-by-year account of events from the 9th century onward. The late Anglo-Saxon period was marked by increasing pressure from renewed Viking activity. Danish kings, particularly Sweyn Forkbeard and his son Knut the Great, established dominion over large parts of England, culminating in the early 11th century with Knut ruling over a North Sea empire that included England, Denmark, and Norway. Knut's reign, 1016 to 1035, consolidated political authority, maintained continuity in governance, and integrated Anglo-Saxon and Scandinavian traditions, demonstrating the adaptive capacity of English institutions. Local elites retained authority under the overarching monarchy, and the church maintained significant influence in governance, education, and social welfare. Throughout the early medieval period, society was organized along hierarchical lines, with kings, nobles, clergy, and freemen forming distinct social strata. Agriculture remained the economic foundation, supplemented by trade in wool, salt, and manufactured goods, particularly in urban centers such as York, London, and Winchester. Coastal and riverine trade routes connected Britain to continental Europe, facilitating the exchange of goods, ideas, and technology. Material culture reflects both Anglo-Saxon and Scandinavian influences, including weaponry, jewelry, ceramics, and textiles, indicating complex networks of cultural exchange and adaptation. By 1066, England was politically and culturally transformed. The consolidation of Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, the spread of Christianity, the integration of Scandinavian settlers, and the establishment of administrative systems provided a stable foundation. Governance combined traditional Germanic practices with innovations introduced under Alfred, Athelstan, and Knut, while economic structures supported both local subsistence and long-distance trade. Military organization, fortified towns, and naval capabilities reflected the ongoing need to respond to external threats, particularly from continental Europe and Northern Islands. These developments positioned England to enter the next historical phase following the Norman conquest. The period between 410 and 1066 illustrates a continuous process of settlement, adaptation, and political consolidation. From post-Roman fragmentation through Anglo-Saxon migration, Christianization, and Viking settlement, the British Isles experienced significant demographic, cultural, and technological change. Legal, administrative, and ecclesiastical systems emerged, providing frameworks for governance and social cohesion. Trade, both local and international, supported population growth and economic complexity. Military organization evolved to meet the challenges of Viking incursions and inter-kingdom conflict. The synthesis of Anglo-Saxon and Scandinavian influence produced a society capable of sustaining political unity under a central monarchy, while maintaining regional identities and local governance structures. By the mid-11th century, England had developed an integrated legal and administrative system, a network of fortified settlements, and a hierarchical society capable of supporting both defense and economic growth. Literacy and record-keeping, centered in monasteries and urban centers, preserved cultural continuity and facilitated governance. Religious institutions played a central role in education, law, and social welfare, while trade and agriculture underpinned economic stability. The Anglo-Saxon and Viking legacies collectively shaped the political, social, and cultural landscape, preparing the British Isles for the transformative impact of the Norman conquest and the subsequent medieval period. The Norman conquest of 1066 represents a defining turning point in the history of England and, more broadly, the British Isles. The defeat of King Harold II at the Battle of Hastings by William, Duke of Normandy, established a new ruling elite and introduced profound political, social, and administrative changes. William, known as William the Conqueror, consolidated control by systematically replacing the Anglo-Saxon aristocracy with Norman nobles, installing loyal followers as landholders across the kingdom. The redistribution of land served both as a reward for military support and as a mechanism to secure loyalty, creating a feudal hierarchy in which the king maintained ultimate authority. The Domesday Book, commissioned in 1086, exemplifies Norman administrative efficiency. This comprehensive survey recorded landholdings, resources, and obligations across England, providing an accurate account of property, population, and wealth. The Domesday Book enabled the Crown to assess taxation, manage estates, and enforce feudal obligations, forming a foundation for long-term governance. The Normans also strengthened military defenses by constructing castles and fortified towns throughout England. including motte and bailey structures and stone fortresses such as the Tower of London, Durham Castle, and Rochester Castle, consolidating control over key strategic locations. Norman rule altered legal and administrative structures, merging Anglo-Saxon practices with continental innovations. Royal courts and itinerant justices expanded the king's authority, standardizing law and ensuring enforcement across regions. Feudal obligations defined land tenure, military service, and taxation, formalizing social hierarchy and integrating local communities into a centralized governance system. Monastic reform accompanied these changes, with Norman abbeys and priories such as Westminster Abbey and Fountains Abbey establishing stricter adherence to Benedictine rules, enhancing religious, educational, and economic influence. Monasteries controlled extensive lands, produced manuscripts, and functioned as centers of literacy, record-keeping, and cultural transmission. The Plantagenet dynasty, beginning with Henry II, 1154 to 1189, further shaped governance, law, and territorial control. Henry II introduced common law through royal courts and legal reforms, which provided uniformity in legal proceedings and precedent-based judgments. The establishment of itinerant judges extended royal authority into local communities. Henry II's reign also saw conflict with the Church, notably with Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, over jurisdiction and authority. These disputes reflected tensions between secular and ecclesiastical power, influencing governance and legal practices throughout the kingdom. Territorial expansion and consolidation occurred concurrently. England was engaged in ongoing conflicts with Wales, Scotland, and France. The Angevin Empire, formed under Henry II, extended English influence over large areas of France, including Normandy, Anjou, Maine, and Aquitaine, linking the British Isles to continental politics. These holdings required diplomatic engagement, military campaigns, and administration across a diverse and multilingual population, shaping the identity and priorities of the English monarchy. The 13th century witnessed significant political evolution with the reign of King John, 1199 to 1216. John's mismanagement of taxation, military failure in France, and disputes with the barons led to the creation of the Magna Carta in 1215. The Magna Carta codified principles of governance, including limitations on royal authority, protection of baronial and ecclesiastical rights, and recognition of legal due process. While initially aimed at resolving elite disputes, the Magna Carta laid the foundation for the development of parliamentary structures and legal precedent, influencing governance well beyond the medieval period. The period also included long-term military conflicts, most notably the Hundred Years' War, 1337 to 1453, with France. Initiated under Edward III, the war resulted from claims to the French throne and disputes over territories in Gascony, Aquitaine, and Normandy. English forces initially achieved notable victories at Crécy, 1346, Poitiers, 1356, and Agincourt, 1415, due to advances in military technology, including the longbow and strategic battlefield tactics. The war impacted both domestic and foreign policy, leading to taxation, conscription, and economic strain, while also influencing national identity, particularly in the south and east of England. The eventual loss of most continental territories by the mid-15th century shifted English focus toward internal development and the consolidation of authority within the British Isles. Internally, England experienced dynastic conflict during the late 15th century, culminating in the Wars of the Roses, 1455 to 1487. This series of civil wars was fought between the rival houses of Lancaster and York, both branches of the Plantagenet dynasty, over the right to the English throne. Battles, including St. Albans, Towton, and Bosworth Field, were characterized by shifting alliances, feudal mobilization, and the involvement of regional lords asserting local authority. The conflict resulted in significant political instability, but also led to innovations in military organization, such as professional archers, improved logistics, and centralized coordination. The eventual victory of Henry Tudor, later Henry VII, at Bosworth in 1485 marked the end of Plantagenet rule and established the Tudor dynasty, ushering in a new era of governance, consolidation, and cultural transformation. Throughout the high and late medieval period, the monarchy maintained control over a complex and hierarchical society. Lords, barons, and knights exercised authority over local regions, owed military service to the crown, and participated in governance through councils and parliaments. Towns and boroughs expanded, with charters granting rights to trade, self-govern, and maintain local courts. The growth of towns such as London, York, Bristol, and Norwich supported both economic activity and administrative authority, linking urban centers with surrounding rural regions. Guilds regulated trade and production, while markets and fairs facilitated regional and long-distance commerce. Agricultural innovations, including the three-field system and improved plowing techniques, increased yields and supported population growth. Religious institutions remained central to cultural, educational, and social life. Monasteries, cathedrals, and parish churches provided literacy, education, and social services. The Cistercian order, introduced in the 12th century, emphasized agricultural development, land management, and economic activity, particularly in rural regions. Monastic scriptoria preserved historical, legal, and theological texts, contributing to the continuity of knowledge. Pilgrimages, festivals, and ecclesiastical courts reinforced moral and legal frameworks, while the church maintained influence over education and literacy among both elites and broader populations. The Black Death, which struck England in 1348 to 1350, caused profound demographic, social, and economic consequences. Estimates suggest that up to one-third of the population perished, leading to labor shortages, shifts in land tenure, and increased bargaining power for surviving peasants and laborers. The resulting social mobility challenged traditional feudal structures, contributing to tensions between lords and peasants, as seen in uprisings such as the Peasants' Revolt of 1381 under Wat Tyler. These events forced adaptations in taxation, labor obligations, and governance, reflecting the dynamic and responsive nature of medieval English society. Cultural and intellectual life evolved in tandem with political and economic developments. Gothic architecture transformed cathedrals and abbeys, exemplified by Canterbury Cathedral, Salisbury Cathedral, and York Minster. Manuscript illumination, literature, and vernacular writing flourished, including works by Geoffrey Chaucer, whose Canterbury Tales reflect social, economic, and cultural realities of late medieval England. Educational institutions, such as Oxford and Cambridge universities, founded in the 12th and 13th centuries, advanced scholarship, clerical training, and administrative expertise, creating a literate elite capable of sustaining governance and cultural continuity. Military, administrative, and legal innovations were interconnected. Knights, heavily armed cavalry, and infantry formations were organized under feudal obligations, while castles and fortified towns provided defensive capacity. Royal courts and itinerant justices applied uniform law across regions, reinforcing central authority. Taxation, both direct and indirect, financed military campaigns, infrastructure, and administration, while trade networks facilitated economic resilience. The coordination of these systems under successive monarchs allowed the crown to maintain control over geographically dispersed and socially stratified populations. Relations with neighboring territories also shaped the period. Scotland, Wales, and Ireland maintained distinct political and cultural identities while interacting with England through warfare, diplomacy, and trade. Anglo-Norman expansion into Wales produced a series of marcher lordships, while Scottish kings maintained independence and periodically challenged English claims. Ireland remained largely under Gaelic control, though English settlements and administrative structures were established in regions such as the Pale around Dublin. These interactions reflected the broader dynamics of the British Isles, linking political developments across islands and shaping subsequent historical trajectories. By the conclusion of the Wars of the Roses in 1485, England had transitioned from a fragmented post-conquest feudal society into a more centralized monarchy under Henry VII, with a foundation for administrative, legal, and economic stability. Institutions established during the Norman and Plantagenet periods, including royal courts, parliaments, administrative offices, taxation systems, and legal precedent, persisted and evolved into early modern structures. Urban centers continued to grow, trade networks expanded, and religious institutions maintained social and educational influence. The intellectual and cultural developments of the high and late medieval periods, including literature, architecture, and education, provided a framework for the Renaissance and the subsequent Tudor era. The high and late medieval period demonstrates the integration of military conquest, administrative consolidation, economic development, and cultural production in shaping the British Isles. From the Norman conquest to the establishment of the Tudor dynasty, England and the surrounding regions experienced continuous political, social, and cultural evolution. Governance structures combined feudal obligations, legal codification, and monarchical authority, while economic activity was sustained through agriculture, trade, and urban development. Religious and educational institutions provided continuity, literacy, and cultural cohesion, ensuring the transmission of knowledge and the reinforcement of social structures. Military conflicts, both domestic and continental, influenced the development of professional armies, fortifications, and administrative coordination, preparing the British Isles for the challenges and transformations of the early modern period. The Tudor period began in 1485 with Henry VII ascending to the English throne, marking the end of the Wars of the Roses and the start of the Tudor dynasty. Henry VII, born Henry Tudor, consolidated power by defeating Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field, the last significant conflict of dynastic struggle between the houses of Lancaster and York. Henry's reign focused on centralizing authority, restoring fiscal stability, and reinforcing the monarchy after decades of internal conflict. He implemented administrative reforms to strengthen the royal council, reduce the influence of overmighty nobles, and increase efficiency in government. By enhancing financial oversight and taxation systems, including customs duties and fines for legal offenses. Henry VII generated a stable revenue stream, reducing dependence on parliamentary grants and allowing the crown to maintain domestic control and foreign diplomacy. Henry VII also strengthened dynastic security through marriage alliances, most notably marrying Elizabeth of York, which united the feuding Lancastrian and Yorkist claims. Additionally, he arranged marriages for his children with European royal houses, establishing international connections that enhanced England's political standing. The monarch maintained vigilance against internal rebellion, suppressing uprisings such as the Yorkist Pretender Lambert Simnel in 1487 and Perkin Warbeck in the 1490s, demonstrating effective intelligence networks, control of the nobility, and military readiness. By the end of his reign in 1509, Henry VII had transformed England into a stable, centralized state with a financially secure monarchy and reduced aristocratic power. Henry VII was succeeded by Henry VIII, 1509 to 1547, whose reign profoundly transformed England's political, religious, and cultural landscape. Henry VIII is perhaps most widely known for initiating the English Reformation, which separated the Church of England from the authority of the Roman Catholic Church. The immediate cause was the Pope's refusal to annul Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon, prompting the enactment of the Act of Supremacy in 1534, which declared the king the supreme head of the Church of England. This move effectively dissolved papal authority in England and allowed the crown to control religious doctrine, appointments, and wealth, including the extensive property of monasteries, which were dissolved between 1536 and 1541. The dissolution of monasteries not only transferred significant land and wealth to the crown and loyal nobles, but also led to social and economic restructuring, as former monastic lands were repurposed for private estates or agricultural development. Henry VIII's religious reforms had long-lasting consequences, establishing a national church independent of Rome while provoking resistance among Catholics and conservative factions. The monarch pursued a series of subsequent marriages, aiming for a male heir, producing Edward VI with Jane Seymour, Mary I with Catherine of Aragon, and Elizabeth I with Anne Boleyn, among others. The king's marital and dynastic policies intersected with political alliances, court factionalism, and noble influence, demonstrating the central role of succession in Tudor governance. Following Henry VIII's death, his son Edward VI, 1547 to 1553, continued the Protestant reforms of the English Reformation. Edward's regency, led by figures such as Edward Seymour, Duke of Somerset, and later John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland, implemented doctrinal, liturgical, and ecclesiastical changes, including the introduction of the Book of Common Prayer in 1549. These reforms codified Protestant theology, standardized worship practices, and further reduced the influence of Roman Catholic traditions in England. Economic and social policies under Edward's regency sought to modernize governance and improve administrative efficiency, though the period was marked by localized uprisings such as the Prayer Book Rebellion of 1549, which reflected resistance to religious and administrative changes. The brief reign of Mary I, 1553 to 1558, reversed many of Edward's Protestant reforms, temporarily restoring Catholicism as the official religion. Mary sought reconciliation with Rome and pursued the re-establishment of papal authority, including the reinstatement of Catholic clerical structures and doctrinal enforcement. The period is marked by the persecution of Protestant leaders, often referred to as the Marian persecutions, which reinforced sectarian divisions and contributed to social tension. Mary's foreign policy focused on consolidating alliances with Habsburg Spain, culminating in her marriage to Philip II of Spain, which had implications for England's international position and domestic opinion. Despite efforts to reassert Catholic dominance, Mary's death in 1558 ended the temporary restoration and paved the way for the Protestant settlement under her half-sister Elizabeth I. Elizabeth I, 1558 to 1603, stabilized England after decades of religious upheaval and political uncertainty. The Elizabethan religious settlement established the Church of England as the national church, balancing elements of Protestant theology with traditional liturgical practices to maintain social cohesion and avoid religious extremism. The settlement included the Act of Uniformity, 1559, which mandated the use of the Book of Common Prayer, and the Act of Supremacy, reaffirming the monarch as the head of the church. Elizabeth's policies maintained political stability while reinforcing royal authority over both religious and civil matters. Elizabeth's reign is also notable for its military and naval achievements. The Spanish Armada of 1588 represented the most significant foreign military threat of her era. Spain, seeking to restore Catholic dominance and counter England's support of Protestant movements on the continent, assembled a fleet to invade. The English Navy, utilizing superior maneuverability, gunnery, and tactical innovation, combined with adverse weather conditions, defeated the Armada, establishing England as a dominant naval power. This victory enhanced the monarchy's legitimacy, demonstrated the effectiveness of professional naval organization, and paved the way for England's overseas expansion. Exploration and overseas trade were central to Elizabethan policy. English merchants, explorers, and privateers, including figures such as Sir Francis Drake, Sir Walter Raleigh, and John Hawkins, expanded maritime knowledge, trade networks, and colonial ventures. These activities established early English presence in North America, the Caribbean, and Africa, contributing to economic growth and laying the groundwork for future imperial expansion. Overseas trade also stimulated domestic industries, including shipbuilding, textiles, and metallurgy, integrating England into broader European and Atlantic economic networks. Cultural development flourished during Elizabeth's reign, with literature, theater, and the arts reaching new levels of sophistication. The work of writers such as William Shakespeare, Christopher Marlowe, and Edmund Spenser reflects the complexity of Elizabethan society, political discourse, and human experience. Education expanded beyond clerical and elite circles, with grammar schools, private tutors, and universities such as Oxford and Cambridge producing an educated and literate gentry capable of administration, diplomacy, and cultural participation. Visual arts, music, and architecture also developed under royal and aristocratic patronage, reflecting both continental influence and English innovation. Economic and social structures underwent significant transformation during the Tudor period. Agricultural practices evolved, with enclosure movements, improvements in livestock breeding, and crop rotation increasing productivity. Trade expanded both domestically and internationally, with the growth of merchant guilds, commercial ports, and financial institutions facilitating economic activity. Population growth, particularly in urban centers such as London, Norwich, and Bristol, led to increased demand for housing, services, and employment, while also contributing to social tensions that required regulatory and administrative responses. The Tudor period also included challenges of governance, succession, and social stability. The monarch relied on a network of ministers, counselors, and regional officials to implement policy and maintain order. Royal proclamations, legal statutes, and administrative oversight ensured compliance across the kingdom, while intelligence networks and diplomatic correspondence monitored domestic and international developments. Rebellion, dissent, and political intrigue were addressed through judicial and military measures, illustrating the balance of authority and negotiation required to maintain stability. By the death of Elizabeth I in 1603, the Tudor dynasty had transformed England from a fractured post-medieval society into a centralized, economically active, culturally vibrant, and religiously reformed state. The monarchy maintained authority over both civil and religious affairs, with administrative, legal, and fiscal structures capable of supporting national governance. England emerged as a significant European power with naval and military capabilities, trade networks, and cultural achievements that positioned the nation for the subsequent Stuart era. The Tudor legacy included a stabilized succession, an established Protestant church, a professionalized administration, and foundations for overseas expansion, all of which influenced the political, social, and cultural trajectory of the British Isles in the 17th century. The Stuart period in Britain began with the accession of James VI of Scotland to the English throne in 1603, following the death of Elizabeth I, uniting the crowns of England and Scotland under James I. James's accession marked the beginning of the personal union of the two kingdoms, although both remained legally distinct, retaining separate parliaments, laws, and administrative systems. James sought to consolidate authority and establish political harmony, promoting the concept of the divine right of kings, which asserted that monarchs derived their authority directly from God and were accountable only to divine judgment. This principle influenced relations with the English Parliament, legal frameworks, and governance practices throughout the Stuart period. James I emphasized diplomatic engagement with continental powers, particularly through marriage alliances and the negotiation of treaties. One of the most significant efforts was the attempted Spanish match, aimed at arranging a marriage between his son, Prince Charles, and a Spanish princess to secure peace with Spain. Domestically, James confronted challenges in balancing royal prerogative with parliamentary authority. Parliament, particularly the House of Commons, resisted excessive taxation and sought to assert influence over fiscal and legal matters, setting the stage for long-term constitutional tensions. Religious policy under James I reflected the need to maintain stability across England and Scotland. The King James Bible, completed in 1611, represented a major cultural and religious achievement, standardizing the English translation of Scripture and supporting the Anglican Church's doctrinal authority. At the same time, James faced dissent from Puritans, who sought further reform of the Church of England, and from Catholics, who faced restrictions following historical rebellions and ongoing fears of papal influence. The Gunpowder Plot of 1605, led by Guy Fawkes and other Catholic conspirators attempting to assassinate the king and Parliament, underscored tensions between religious groups and reinforced Protestant political dominance. James's son, Charles I, ascended to the throne in 1625, inheriting unresolved tensions between monarchy and Parliament. Charles continued to assert the divine right of kings, governing without parliamentary consent at times and relying on alternative revenue mechanisms, including ship money and forced loans. These measures, alongside perceived favoritism toward high Anglican practices and attempts to enforce religious conformity, generated widespread opposition. Charles's reign became increasingly defined by conflict over authority, taxation, and religious policy, which undermined trust between the crown and both political and religious elites. By 1642, these tensions culminated in the English Civil War, a complex series of conflicts between royalists, cavaliers, who supported the king, and parliamentarians, roundheads, who sought to limit monarchical power and promote parliamentary sovereignty. The war encompassed multiple phases, including battles such as Edgehill, 1642, Marston Moor, 1644, and Naseby, 1645, reflecting both military strategy and regional allegiances. Parliamentarians, under leadership figures including Oliver Cromwell, organized the new model army, introducing disciplined training, centralized command, and professional standards that enhanced battlefield effectiveness. The conflict involved not only military engagements, but also ideological, religious, and political disputes, including debates over governance, constitutional authority, and the rights of citizens relative to the crown. The Civil War resulted in decisive parliamentarian victories, leading to the capture and trial of Charles I. In 1649, Charles was executed, a landmark event that fundamentally altered the structure of monarchy and governance in Britain. The monarchy was abolished, and England entered a period of republican government known as the Commonwealth, overseen by the Rump Parliament and, from 1653, the Protectorate under Oliver Cromwell as Lord Protector. The Commonwealth sought to consolidate power, reform administration, and enforce religious and moral codes aligned with Puritan principles. Legal, fiscal, and military reforms were implemented, including the centralization of governance, maintenance of a standing army, and regulation of commerce and trade. Cromwell's rule emphasized stability and order but faced resistance from royalists, Catholics, and disaffected groups in Scotland and Ireland. Military campaigns in Ireland, 1649 to 1650, and Scotland, 1650 to 1651, extended central authority over the British Isles, enforcing Protestant settlement and administrative control. Cromwell's suppression of opposition included decisive military action, legal measures, and reorganization of local governance. The Protectorate balanced authoritarian control with administrative innovation, strengthening central institutions while limiting the influence of traditional elites. Following Cromwell's death in 1658, political instability and lack of effective leadership led to the restoration of the monarchy in 1660 under Charles II, son of Charles I. The restoration re-established the monarchy, the Church of England, and aristocratic governance, while maintaining some institutional reforms from the Commonwealth. Charles II's reign included efforts to stabilize the economy, manage foreign relations, and reconcile divisions created by civil war. Parliament retained increased authority over taxation and legislation, reflecting lessons learned from the prior conflict. Charles II also managed religious tensions, particularly between Catholics, Anglicans, and dissenting Protestant groups, navigating policy to prevent renewed conflict while maintaining royal prerogative. Charles II's brother, James II, ascended in 1685 and pursued policies favoring Catholics and absolute monarchy. including the appointment of Catholics to military and administrative positions and the suspension of penal laws against Catholics. James's actions provoked opposition from political elites and parliament, culminating in the Glorious Revolution of 1688. William of Orange, married to James's Protestant daughter Mary, invaded England with parliamentary support, leading to James II's flight and the peaceful transfer of power to William III and Mary II. This event established the principle of constitutional monarchy, limiting royal authority and reinforcing parliamentary sovereignty, particularly in matters of taxation, law, and succession. In 1707, during the reign of Queen Anne, the Act of Union formally unified the kingdoms of England and Scotland into the Kingdom of Great Britain, consolidating political authority and creating a single parliament at Westminster. The Union integrated administrative, legal, and fiscal systems while retaining certain regional legal traditions in Scotland. This centralization facilitated the development of national policy, coordinated foreign relations, and expanded economic networks, providing a foundation for Britain's emergence as a major European and global power. Throughout the Stuart period, military organization evolved in response to both internal and external challenges. Civil war demonstrated the importance of professional armies, logistics, and disciplined leadership, exemplified by the new model army. Naval power expanded, reflecting strategic priorities in trade, defense, and conflict with continental powers, particularly the Netherlands and France. Fortifications, garrisons, and militia structures were developed to maintain domestic security, while advances in artillery, infantry organization, and supply chains improved operational effectiveness. These innovations influenced subsequent British military practice and contributed to the nation's capacity for overseas engagement. Economic and social structures during the Stuart period reflected continuity and transformation. Agricultural production supported population growth, while urban centers expanded in response to trade, industry, and administrative functions. London grew into a major commercial hub, with markets, guilds, and financial institutions facilitating commerce. Mercantilist policies promoted trade expansion and colonial ventures, particularly in North America and the Caribbean. Economic regulation included taxation, tariffs, and management of royal monopolies, reflecting an increasingly centralized approach to national resources. Religious, cultural, and intellectual developments were intertwined with political authority. The Stuart period saw ongoing tension between Anglican, Puritan, and Catholic traditions, shaping legislation, social policy, and governance. Education expanded through universities and grammar schools, while literacy and printed materials facilitated the spread of ideas, political discourse, and religious debate. The period also witnessed scientific inquiry and philosophical thought, including contributions from figures such as Robert Boyle, Isaac Newton, and others, reflecting an environment in which intellectual and religious developments influenced governance, social policy, and technological progress. By 1714, with the death of Queen Anne, the Stuart period concluded, transitioning Britain to the Hanoverian dynasty. The period from 1603 to 1714 had transformed the British Isles in terms of governance, law, religion, military organization, economic structure, and cultural development. Centralized authority, constitutional frameworks, and parliamentary influence emerged alongside social and religious diversity. Military and administrative innovations provided stability and capacity for overseas engagement. Economic and cultural networks expanded, integrating England, Scotland, and other territories into broader European and global contexts. The legacy of the Stuart period laid the groundwork for the political, economic, and cultural development of Britain in the 18th century. The Georgian period in Britain began with the accession of George I in 1714, following the death of Queen Anne, the last Stuart monarch. George I, a member of the House of Hanover, inherited the British crown as a result of the Act of Settlement 1701, which established Protestant succession and excluded Catholics from the throne. The accession initiated the Hanoverian dynasty, which would rule Britain until 1837, encompassing the reigns of George I through George IV and, finally, William IV. The early Georgian period was marked by the consolidation of parliamentary power, the evolution of political parties, and the establishment of a stable constitutional monarchy, reflecting lessons learned from the Glorious Revolution and the Stuart period. George I, who spoke little English and relied heavily on ministers for governance, delegated authority to leading figures such as Robert Walpole, widely regarded as Britain's first prime minister. Walpole's administration, 1721 to 1742, strengthened centralized government, promoted fiscal stability, and encouraged economic growth. Through management of taxation, national debt, and public finance, Walpole established the foundations for modern governmental administration, including regular parliamentary oversight of the treasury, strategic use of patronage to ensure political stability, and measures to maintain public confidence in currency and credit. Political life in Georgian Britain was characterized by the development of the Whig and Tory parties, which represented differing approaches to monarchy, parliamentary authority, and foreign policy. Whigs generally supported parliamentary supremacy, commercial interests, and Protestant succession, while Tories advocated for aristocratic privilege, traditional monarchy, and often maintained residual loyalty to Jacobite claims. These political divisions shaped legislative debates, public policy, and governance, contributing to the emergence of a parliamentary system with enduring institutions of cabinet government, ministerial responsibility, and structured party competition. The early Georgian period also faced challenges from Jacobite uprisings, reflecting ongoing support for Stuart claims to the throne. The uprisings of 1715 and 1745, led respectively by James Francis Edward Stuart and Charles Edward Stuart, the Young Pretender, represented attempts to restore the Stuarts to power. Both rebellions were ultimately defeated by government forces through a combination of military organization, local militia, and strategic intelligence. The Battle of Culloden, 1746, decisively ended major Jacobite resistance, consolidating Hanoverian rule in Britain and extending central authority over Scotland. In the aftermath, the government implemented measures to integrate Scotland politically, economically, and culturally, including the suppression of Highland clans, disarmament, and the establishment of English legal and administrative systems. Britain's foreign policy during the Georgian era focused on European diplomacy, colonial expansion, and maritime dominance. Britain engaged in the War of the Austrian Succession, 1740 to 1748, and the Seven Years' War, 1756 to 1763, asserting influence in continental and colonial affairs. The 7 Years' War, in particular, transformed Britain into a global power, yielding significant territorial gains in North America, the Caribbean, and India. The capture of Canada, Florida, and strategic Caribbean islands expanded Britain's empire, while the consolidation of trading posts and administrative control in India laid the foundation for future imperial governance. These conflicts also stimulated military innovation, naval expansion, and logistical coordination, ensuring Britain's capacity to project power globally. Naval development was central to Georgian policy. The Royal Navy, supported by advanced shipbuilding, professional officers, and strategic organization, ensured Britain's ability to protect trade routes, colonies, and territorial interests. Naval dominance enabled Britain to enforce mercantile policies, deter foreign intervention, and expand overseas influence. Ports such as Portsmouth, Plymouth, and Liverpool became key centers of shipbuilding, commerce, and strategic deployment, linking domestic industry with imperial ambitions. Maritime innovation, including improved navigation techniques, ship design, and logistical planning, reinforced Britain's global position. Economic transformation during the Georgian period was profound, encompassing agricultural, commercial, and industrial developments. Agricultural innovations, including crop rotation, selective breeding, and mechanization, increased productivity and supported population growth. Land ownership and estate management evolved, with enclosure movements consolidating fields, redefining tenancy arrangements, and altering rural social structures. While enclosures enhanced efficiency, they also displaced rural populations, contributing to migration toward urban centers and industrializing regions. Urbanization accelerated, particularly in London, Manchester, Birmingham, and Glasgow, reflecting both industrial growth and commercial activity. Towns and cities developed infrastructure, including streets, bridges, ports, and public buildings, supporting the needs of expanding populations. Commercial networks facilitated trade in textiles, coal, iron, and manufactured goods, while financial institutions such as banks, stock exchanges, and insurance companies regulated investment, credit, and risk. Domestic and international trade integrated Britain into a global economic system, connecting Atlantic, European, and colonial markets. Industrialization began in earnest during the late Georgian period, laying the foundation for the Industrial Revolution. Key developments included mechanized textile production, advancements in iron smelting, the use of steam engines, and the growth of factory-based manufacturing. Technological innovations, such as James Watt's improvements to the steam engine, increased energy efficiency and industrial output. Infrastructure improvements, including canals, roads, and later railways, facilitated the movement of raw materials, finished goods, and labor, transforming economic and social organization. Urban industrial centers emerged as focal points of production, contributing to demographic change, labor specialization, and social stratification. Social structures in Georgian Britain reflected a combination of continuity and transformation. Aristocratic families retained influence through land ownership, political participation, and social networks, while an emerging middle class gained wealth and influence through commerce, industry, and professional occupations. Laboring classes experienced both opportunity and challenge, with wage labor, apprenticeship systems, and factory work replacing traditional forms of employment in rural or craft-based contexts. Social mobility was influenced by education, economic innovation, and commercial success, while also constrained by legal and cultural norms. Education and intellectual activity flourished during the Georgian period, influenced by Enlightenment thought and scientific inquiry. Universities, academies, and private schools promoted literacy, classical knowledge, and practical learning in mathematics, navigation, and engineering. Figures such as Adam Smith in economics, James Hutton in geology, and Edward Jenner in medicine contributed to intellectual and practical advancements that impacted governance, industry, and society. Scientific societies, including the Royal Society, facilitated the dissemination of knowledge, experimentation, and innovation, linking academic inquiry with practical applications in agriculture, engineering, and medicine. Cultural life also developed, encompassing architecture, literature, music, and the arts. Georgian architecture reflected classical influence, symmetry, and urban planning, evident in buildings such as Bath's Royal Crescent, Georgian townhouses in London, and country estates like Chatsworth House. Literature and theater expanded, with works by Samuel Johnson, Alexander Pope, and Henry Fielding reflecting societal norms, moral discourse, and cultural values. Music, including compositions by George Frideric Handel, gained prominence in both public and private spheres. Patronage by aristocrats, monarchs, and urban elites supported cultural production, contributing to a distinct Georgian identity. Domestic governance during the Georgian period relied on a combination of monarchy, parliament, and ministerial administration. Legal and fiscal systems evolved to support population growth, economic activity, and military readiness. Parliament exercised oversight of taxation, legislation, and policy implementation, while ministers coordinated administration, trade regulation, and foreign policy. The monarchy retained symbolic and executive authority, intervening in diplomacy, military planning, and patronage. The balance of power between the crown, parliament, and the judiciary provided political stability while allowing adaptation to economic, social, and military challenges. Religious life was predominantly Anglican, but dissenting Protestant groups, including Presbyterians, Baptists, and Methodists, grew in influence. Religious pluralism required negotiation of legal tolerance, taxation, and social integration, influencing local governance and community organization. Religious institutions continued to provide education, social services, and moral oversight, reinforcing cohesion while responding to population growth and urbanization. Catholicism remained restricted, though social and political accommodation evolved in response to broader European developments and domestic considerations. The Georgian period concluded with the reign of William IV and the ascension of Queen Victoria in 1837, marking the transition to the Victorian era. By the end of the Georgian period, Britain had undergone extensive political consolidation, economic transformation, industrialization, and cultural development. Parliamentary government and constitutional monarchy were firmly established, while military and naval capabilities ensured both domestic security and global influence. Economic growth, technological innovation, and social restructuring prepared Britain for the challenges and opportunities of the 19th century. The Georgian period exemplifies the integration of political authority, economic expansion, military innovation, intellectual development, and cultural achievement. Centralized government and parliamentary oversight ensured effective administration, while economic and industrial transformation laid the foundation for modern Britain. Social, cultural, and intellectual advancements reflected both continuity and adaptation, linking domestic developments with global influence. Military organization, naval dominance, and colonial expansion enhanced Britain's international standing, while domestic stability facilitated innovation, population growth, and urbanization. The legacy of the Georgian period shaped governance, economy, society, and culture, influencing the trajectory of Britain into the Victorian era and beyond. The Victorian period in Britain began in 1837 with the accession of Queen Victoria to the throne, marking the start of a reign that would last until 1901. This era coincided with the apex of the Industrial Revolution, rapid urbanization, and the expansion of the British Empire, establishing Britain as the preeminent global power. Victoria's reign oversaw profound political, economic, social, and technological transformation, characterized by the modernization of governance, industrial growth, the expansion of trade networks, and significant shifts in social structures and cultural life. Politically, the Victorian period was defined by the continued evolution of the constitutional monarchy, in which the powers of the sovereign became increasingly symbolic while real authority rested with Parliament and the cabinet. The reign of Victoria followed earlier constitutional developments established during the Georgian period and the Stuart legacy, reinforcing parliamentary supremacy. Prime ministers such as Lord Melbourne, Sir Robert Peel, Benjamin Disraeli, and William Gladstone shaped domestic and foreign policy, reflecting party divisions between the Conservatives and Liberals, which represented differing approaches to social reform, fiscal policy, and imperial strategy. Significant domestic reforms occurred under parliamentary legislation, particularly during the 19th century. The Reform Acts of 1832, 1867, and 1884 to 85 progressively expanded the franchise, increasing political participation for urban and rural men and addressing disparities in representation caused by industrialization and urban growth. Electoral reform was accompanied by regulation of parliamentary processes, codification of election procedures, and efforts to reduce corruption, including the introduction of the Secret Ballot Act of 1872. These measures contributed to the development of representative government while maintaining social stability amidst industrial and demographic change. The Industrial Revolution profoundly altered the economic and social landscape of Victorian Britain. Mechanization, factory-based production, and technological innovation increased productivity across textiles, metallurgy, coal mining, and transportation. Urbanization accelerated as populations migrated from rural areas to industrial centers such as London, Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow, and Sheffield. Infrastructure developments, including railways, canals, roads, and telegraph networks, facilitated the efficient movement of goods, people, and information, linking domestic markets and integrating Britain into global trade networks. Economic policy during the Victorian period included the adoption of free trade principles, exemplified by the repeal of the Corn Laws in 1846, which reduced tariffs on imported grain and promoted competitive markets. Financial institutions, including banks, insurance companies, and the London Stock Exchange, supported industrial expansion and international commerce. Britain's global economic influence was reinforced by overseas trade in raw materials, manufactured goods, and strategic commodities, with colonies and dominions providing both markets and resources. Industrial growth contributed to a rising middle class engaged in commerce, professional occupations, and managerial roles, while simultaneously creating a growing urban working class facing challenges in housing, sanitation, and labor conditions. Social reforms during the Victorian period sought to address the consequences of rapid industrialization and urbanization. The Factory Acts regulated working hours, particularly for women and children, while the Mines Act 1842 prohibited the employment of women and children underground. Public health reforms, including the Public Health Act 1848 and subsequent legislation, addressed sanitation, water supply, and disease prevention in rapidly expanding urban areas. Education was also reformed, with the Elementary Education Act of 1870 establishing compulsory schooling for children and creating the basis for a standardized national education system. These reforms reflected the growing recognition of state responsibility in promoting social welfare, public health, and literacy. Cultural life during the Victorian period was characterized by literature, science, philosophy, and the arts. Victorian literature reflected social commentary, moral discourse, and exploration of human experience, with authors such as Charles Dickens, Charlotte Bronte, Emily Bronte, Thomas Hardy, and George Eliot producing works that examined industrial society, urban life, and social inequality. Scientific advances, including Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, influenced intellectual thought and prompted debate regarding religion, society, and human understanding. The proliferation of periodicals, newspapers, and public lectures facilitated the dissemination of knowledge and contributed to an informed, literate population. Architecture, painting, and music also developed, with the Gothic revival in architecture and the establishment of institutions such as the Royal Academy of Arts, fostering artistic achievement. The Victorian period saw the expansion of the British Empire to unprecedented scale. Strategic colonies and dominions extended across Africa, Asia, the Americas, and the Pacific. The empire provided raw materials, trade routes, and markets, reinforcing Britain's economic power and geopolitical influence. Colonial administration evolved through legal, military, and bureaucratic mechanisms, including direct governance in India following the Indian Rebellion of 1857, which led to the transfer of power from the East India Company to the British Crown. Governance structures, civil services, and judicial systems in the colonies mirrored British practices while adapting to local conditions, facilitating control and integration within the imperial framework. Military and naval developments were central to imperial expansion and domestic security. The Royal Navy maintained global maritime dominance, ensuring the protection of trade routes, colonies, and strategic interests. Technological innovation, including steam-powered ships and rifled artillery, enhanced operational capacity and strategic reach. The Army underwent reforms in structure, training, and administration, particularly after experiences in colonial campaigns such as the Crimean War, 1853 to 1856, and the Indian Rebellion, improving effectiveness, logistics, and discipline. Military and naval power underpinned Britain's ability to maintain and expand its empire while ensuring domestic stability. Scientific and technological advancements during the Victorian period were extensive. The Industrial Revolution spurred innovation in engineering, chemistry, metallurgy, and transportation. Developments in railways, telegraphs, steam engines, and mechanized production transformed industry, commerce, and communication. Scientific societies, research institutions, and industrial organizations facilitated experimentation, the dissemination of knowledge, and practical application. Innovations such as the Bessemer process for steel production, improvements in coal mining technology, and mechanized textile machinery enhanced industrial capacity and competitiveness. Victorian Britain became a global center for engineering expertise, scientific inquiry, and technological innovation, influencing economic and military development worldwide. Religious life during the Victorian period reflected both continuity and change. The Church of England remained the established church, but religious pluralism expanded with nonconformist denominations, including Methodists, Baptists, Presbyterians, and Quakers, influencing social policy, education, and civic engagement. Catholic emancipation, achieved with the Roman Catholic Relief Act of 1829, allowed greater participation in public life and contributed to religious tolerance. Religious debate, moral reform movements, and philanthropic activity intersected with social reform, education, and public welfare, shaping societal values and civic responsibility. Social and labor structures evolved in response to industrialization. Urban working-class communities faced crowded housing, inadequate sanitation, and fluctuating employment, prompting government and philanthropic interventions. Trade unions developed, advocating for workers' rights, improved conditions, and political representation. Legislative measures such as the 10 Hours Act of 1847 limited working hours, particularly for women and children, while initiatives in housing, public health, and education addressed the effects of rapid urban growth. Social stratification persisted, but mobility increased for the middle classes through professional, commercial, and industrial success, contributing to a diversified and complex social hierarchy. The Victorian period also witnessed significant demographic change. Britain's population expanded from approximately 16 million in 1831 to over 38 million by 1901, driven by industrial employment, agricultural improvement, and urban migration. Urban centers became economic and cultural hubs, while rural areas experienced agricultural transformation, mechanization, and population decline. Patterns of migration, both domestic and international, facilitated labor availability, the spread of ideas, and the integration of Britain into global economic and cultural networks. Foreign relations during the Victorian period focused on maintaining the balance of power in Europe, securing colonial interests, and expanding trade networks. Britain engaged in diplomatic and military activity to preserve maritime dominance, protect commerce, and intervene strategically in European and global conflicts. The Opium Wars, 1839 to 1842 and 1856 to 1860, in China exemplified Britain's use of military force to secure trade interests and enforce treaty obligations, resulting in territorial gains, trade concessions, and extraterritorial rights. Diplomatic engagement in Europe, Africa, and the Americas reflected strategic priorities linked to economic growth, imperial security, and geopolitical influence. The Victorian era concluded in 1901 with the death of Queen Victoria, after 64 years of rule. By this time, Britain had transformed from a predominantly agrarian and regional society into a highly industrialized, urbanized, and globally influential nation. Parliamentary democracy was more established, economic and industrial structures had expanded, social and educational reforms had altered daily life, and the empire had reached the height of its territorial extent. Scientific, cultural, and technological developments reinforced Britain's global position, shaping the foundation for the social, political, and economic transformations of the 20th century. The Victorian period exemplifies the integration of political stability, economic development, social reform, cultural achievement, and imperial expansion. Centralized administration, parliamentary governance, and constitutional monarchy provided the framework for domestic and international engagement. Industrialization and technological innovation transformed production, urban life, and economic networks. Social reform and educational expansion addressed the consequences of rapid growth, while the empire extended Britain's influence across the globe. The Victorian legacy established the structural, institutional, and cultural foundations of modern Britain. The 20th century in Britain began with the death of Queen Victoria in 1901 and the accession of Edward VII, marking the start of the Edwardian era. This period initiated a series of political, economic, social, and cultural transformations that reshaped Britain and its position in the world. The Edwardian era, 1901 to 1910, was characterized by relative domestic stability, economic growth, and the maintenance of Britain's global influence as the leading industrial, naval, and colonial power. Industrial production continued to expand, with steel, coal, textiles, and engineering forming the core of the economy, while urbanization and the growth of cities such as London, Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow, and Liverpool reflected the ongoing consequences of the Industrial Revolution. Social reform during the early 20th century addressed industrial and urban conditions, emphasizing education, labor regulation, and public health. The Education Act 1902 restructured secondary education, expanding access and standardizing curricula. Labor reforms, including the Trade Boards Act 1909, established minimum wages in select industries, while the Old Age Pensions Act 1908 introduced state support for the elderly. Public health initiatives improved sanitation, housing, and urban infrastructure, mitigating the effects of industrial overcrowding. Political reforms also included the gradual expansion of suffrage. The Representation of the People Act 1918 extended the vote to all men over 21 and women over 30, while the 1928 Act achieved equal suffrage for men and women at age 21. Britain entered the First World War, 1914 to 1918, following the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and the subsequent escalation of European alliances and obligations. Britain declared war on Germany in August 1914, committing military forces to continental Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and naval operations worldwide. The British Expeditionary Force fought on the Western Front in France and Belgium, engaging in major battles including Mons, the Somme, 1916, and Passchendaele, 1917. Trench warfare, technological innovation in artillery, machine guns, chemical weapons, and logistical challenges defined the conflict. Casualties were high, with over 700,000 British military deaths and millions wounded. Naval power remained central to British strategy. The Royal Navy enforced a blockade of Germany, protected shipping lanes, and engaged in fleet operations, including the Battle of Jutland, 1916, which preserved British maritime supremacy. The British Merchant Marine facilitated supply chains for military and civilian needs, ensuring the transport of troops, food, and raw materials. Industrial mobilization supported the war effort through munitions production, mechanized transport, and agricultural supply, with civilian and labor organizations contributing to national coordination. The war had significant political and social effects. Women entered the workforce in large numbers, assuming roles in factories, transport, administration, and medical services, altering traditional gender roles and expectations. The Representation of the People Act 1918 reflected acknowledgement of women's contribution to the war effort and broader social change. Economically, wartime expenditure and debt altered fiscal policy, while social unrest and labor strikes highlighted tensions in industrial relations. Britain's global influence expanded through involvement in post-war treaties, including the Treaty of Versailles, 1919, which imposed territorial and military restrictions on Germany and reorganized colonial mandates under British administration. Following the First World War, Britain faced economic, political, and social challenges. Demobilization and reintegration of military personnel required employment initiatives, while returning soldiers competed for limited jobs in industry and agriculture. Economic recession, inflation, and labor unrest marked the post-war period, including strikes in coal mining, railways, and transport sectors. Social reform continued with the establishment of housing programs, public health improvements, and education expansion. Political developments included the rise of the Labour Party, reflecting industrial working-class interests and expanding representation in Parliament. The interwar period, 1919 to 1939, was marked by fluctuations in economic stability, colonial policy, and foreign relations. Britain faced the effects of the Great Depression, 1929 to 1939, which led to high unemployment, reductions in wages, and social hardship in industrial regions, particularly in the north of England, Scotland, and Wales. Economic policy emphasized fiscal austerity, currency stabilization, and limited state intervention, while regional development programs attempted to address disparities in infrastructure, industry, and employment. Political coalitions, including the national government, 1931 to 1935, sought to stabilize governance through cross-party cooperation. Colonial administration and the British Empire remained central to global policy. Britain managed dominions including Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa with a degree of self-governance while retaining control over strategic territories and colonies in Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean. The Statute of Westminster 1931 formalized legislative independence for the Dominions while maintaining allegiance to the British Crown. In India, political independence movements gained momentum, including the activities of the Indian National Congress, Mohandas Gandhi, and other nationalist organizations, influencing British colonial policy and administrative responses. Britain entered the Second World War, 1939 to 1945, following the German invasion of Poland, honoring commitments under mutual defense treaties. Britain declared war on Germany on September 3, 1939, and mobilized the armed forces, including the British Army, Royal Navy, and Royal Air Force. Early military setbacks included the fall of France, 1940, while the Battle of Britain, 1940, marked a pivotal defensive victory, relying on air power, radar technology, and civilian coordination in the air defense of the United Kingdom. Strategic bombing campaigns, including the Blitz, 1940 to 1941, caused civilian casualties and urban destruction, prompting civil defense measures, evacuation of children, and coordination of housing and relief efforts. Global conflict expanded across Europe, North Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. British forces participated in campaigns in North Africa against Axis powers, in the Mediterranean, in the Middle East, and in Asia, particularly against Japanese expansion. Colonial and Dominion contributions, including troops from India, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and African colonies, supported the war effort in manpower, logistics, and industrial production. Naval operations ensured protection of maritime trade routes, convoys, and amphibious operations, while technological advancements in code-breaking, radar, and cryptography enhanced strategic capabilities. The Second World War had profound social and economic consequences for Britain. Industrial mobilization involved the expansion of manufacturing capacity, rationing of food and raw materials, and reorganization of labor. Women again entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers, assuming roles in munitions production, transportation, administration, and the armed services. Civilian infrastructure, housing, and public services were maintained under challenging conditions, including air raids, resource shortages, and population displacement. The war also accelerated technological innovation, including in aviation, radar, medicine, and industrial processes. The post-war period, 1945 to 2000, was characterized by decolonization, economic recovery, political realignment, and social reform. The Labor government under Clement Attlee, 1945 to 1951, implemented the welfare state, including the National Health Service, 1948, Social Security, public housing, and nationalized industries such as coal, railways, and steel. Britain faced economic challenges, including post-war reconstruction, currency stabilization, and industrial modernization, while foreign policy focused on maintaining global influence amidst a declining empire and the emergence of the Cold War. Decolonization transformed Britain's international role. India gained independence in 1947, followed by Pakistan, Burma, Myanmar, Ceylon, Sri Lanka, and other territories across Africa, the Caribbean, and Southeast Asia. The Suez Crisis, 1956, demonstrated the limitations of British military power and highlighted the shift of global influence toward the United States and the Soviet Union. Remaining dominions and colonies transitioned to independence under negotiated settlements, providing political, administrative, and economic frameworks for post-colonial governance. Economic, social, and cultural change continued through the latter half of the century. Britain experienced post-war economic recovery in the 1950s and 1960s, with rising living standards, expanded education, and growth in consumer goods production. Urban redevelopment, infrastructure investment, and housing programs addressed wartime destruction and urban overcrowding. Social reforms included the Education Act 1944, expanded welfare provision, and policies promoting equality, while healthcare and public health improved under the NHS framework. Cultural development reflected modernization and diversification. The rise of popular culture, mass media, television, radio, and music, including the emergence of British rock and pop in the 1960s, influenced national identity and international perception. Literature, art, and cinema flourished, exploring contemporary social issues, historical themes, and technological innovation. Immigration from former colonies contributed to cultural diversity, influencing food, religion, music, and urban life, while political and social integration became central to national policy. Political evolution included the continued alternation of conservative and labor governments, reflecting industrial, regional, and class-based divisions. Key legislation addressed labor relations, housing, health, education, and social equality. The UK maintained a constitutional monarchy with a parliamentary system, emphasizing accountability, democratic governance, and legal frameworks consistent with evolving social norms. The House of Commons and House of Lords adapted to legislative, fiscal, and political challenges, maintaining governance continuity and stability. Britain's global role shifted from empire to participation in international organizations, including the United Nations, NATO, and the Commonwealth of Nations. Economic partnerships, trade agreements, and diplomatic engagement reflected Britain's ongoing influence despite the decline of its territorial empire. Participation in European economic structures, including negotiations leading to membership in the European Economic Community, 1973, reflected integration into broader continental markets while balancing domestic political priorities. Technological and industrial change continued through the 20th century. Mechanization, electrification, transport networks, communication systems, and manufacturing advancements modernized both industry and daily life. Scientific research and higher education expanded, supporting innovation in medicine, engineering, computing, and space exploration. Industrial modernization and service sector growth transformed labor patterns, regional economies, and urban development, integrating Britain into globalized networks of commerce, communication, and innovation. By the end of the 20th century, Britain had experienced 2 world wars, significant social reform, decolonization, economic modernization, technological innovation, and cultural transformation. The nation transitioned from a dominant imperial power to a modern industrialized society integrated into global political, economic, and cultural networks. Population growth, urbanization, labor organization, education expansion, and technological development reflected sustained structural change, while constitutional monarchy, parliamentary governance, and legal frameworks provided stability and continuity. The 21st century in Britain began with the continuation of constitutional monarchy and parliamentary democracy established in prior centuries, under the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, who had ruled since 1952. This period has been characterized by political devolution, economic restructuring, globalization, technological development, and evolving social and cultural dynamics. Britain entered the century with an established welfare state, an integrated economy, and a globalized position in trade, diplomacy, and culture. Governance structures maintain the constitutional monarchy, with the Prime Minister and Parliament exercising executive and legislative authority, while the monarchy retained ceremonial and symbolic functions. The early 2000s were dominated by domestic political developments and international engagement. Tony Blair, as Prime Minister, 1997 to 2007, led the Labour government following electoral victories emphasizing modernization, economic stability, and public service reform. Blair's administration focused on healthcare, education, welfare policy, and constitutional reforms, including devolution for Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, establishing devolved legislatures with legislative and administrative powers in areas such as health, education, and local governance. Devolved institutions included the Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Synod, and the Northern Ireland Assembly, reshaping the relationship between regional governments and Westminster while maintaining sovereignty under the United Kingdom. Internationally, Britain engaged in global security and foreign policy operations, including participation in NATO, the United Nations, and coalition efforts in conflict zones. British forces were deployed in Afghanistan following the 2001 terrorist attacks and participated in the Iraq War beginning in 2003, reflecting commitments to international security and alliance obligations. Military operations involved complex coordination of army, naval, and air forces, logistical planning, intelligence operations, and civil-military engagement, while prompting domestic debate regarding strategic, ethical, and fiscal implications. Britain also played a role in global counterterrorism, security cooperation, and humanitarian interventions, reflecting a continued international presence despite reduced imperial authority. Economic development in the 21st century involved integration into global markets, financial modernization, and the adoption of technological and service-oriented economic sectors. The financial sector, centered in London, remained a key driver of national and international economic activity, while manufacturing and traditional industries declined relative to service industries, technology, and creative sectors. Policy responses addressed globalization, market competition, and technological change, including investment in infrastructure, digital networks, and education to support innovation and labor market adaptation. The 2008 global financial crisis significantly affected Britain, prompting fiscal and monetary intervention, regulatory reform, and economic stimulus to stabilize banking, employment, and public finance. Recovery strategies involved austerity measures, restructuring of public expenditure, and support for economic competitiveness. Demographic and social change continued to influence political and cultural development. Immigration from Europe, Asia, Africa, and former colonies increased cultural diversity and reshaped labor markets, urban communities, and social services. Policies addressing integration, education, employment, housing, and public services sought to accommodate population growth and cultural pluralism. Social issues such as gender equality, LGBT+ rights, and disability access progressed through legislation, public policy, and advocacy, contributing to evolving legal frameworks and civic norms. Education systems, higher education expansion, and vocational training are adapted to globalized economic requirements, technology, and workforce needs. Britain's political landscape in the 21st century has been influenced by party dynamics, referenda, and constitutional debate. The Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition, 2010 to 2015, and subsequent conservative governments addressed economic recovery, public sector reform, and constitutional issues. Regional identity, nationalism, and political autonomy debates intensified, particularly in Scotland, where the 2014 Scottish independence referendum demonstrated the continuing relevance of regional self-determination, although a majority voted to remain in the United Kingdom. Devolution has remained a central feature of constitutional development, with legislative powers, fiscal arrangements, and local governance reflecting complex negotiations between Westminster and devolved administrations. The issue of European integration became central in the second decade of the century. Britain had been a member of the European Union since 1973, participating in the single market, customs union, and policy-making processes. Domestic debate over sovereignty, immigration, trade, and economic policy culminated in the 2016 Brexit referendum, in which a majority voted to leave the EU. The subsequent Brexit negotiations, 2016 to 2020, established new trade, regulatory, and political arrangements, including the Withdrawal Agreement, redefining Britain's relationship with Europe and requiring adjustments to domestic economic, legal, and administrative systems. Brexit had implications for trade, industry, migration, and constitutional arrangements, particularly regarding Northern Ireland and the devolved nations. Technological transformation has been a defining feature of 21st century Britain. Digital communication, internet infrastructure, and mobile technology have transformed industry, commerce, government, and daily life. E-commerce, financial technology, data management, and automation have reshaped economic structures and employment patterns, while innovations in artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and renewable energy reflect ongoing research and development investment. Public services have increasingly adopted digital platforms for healthcare, education, transportation, and administration, enhancing efficiency and accessibility while presenting challenges regarding security, regulation, and data protection. Healthcare and social policy have evolved to meet demographic and public health challenges. The National Health Service, NHS, continued to provide universal health coverage, adapting to technological change, population aging, and chronic disease management. Public health initiatives addressed communicable diseases, vaccination programs, and emergency response planning. The COVID-19 pandemic, 2020 to 2022, tested healthcare infrastructure, emergency management, and public policy coordination, prompting nationwide measures including lockdowns, vaccination campaigns, testing, and resource allocation. The pandemic also influenced social behavior, economic activity, and public policy priorities, highlighting the interdependence of health, economy, and governance. Cultural, social, and artistic development has reflected both continuity and transformation. Britain maintains a vibrant literary, musical, visual, and performing arts tradition, influenced by its historical legacy and global exchange. Film, television, music, literature, and digital media have an international reach, contributing to cultural influence and economic activity. Urban and regional cultural institutions, museums, and galleries provide public access to heritage and contemporary work. Education, arts funding, and public engagement programs support creative industries, innovation, and cultural participation, reinforcing both national identity and global cultural presence. Environmental policy and sustainability emerged as central concerns in the 21st century. Britain implemented measures addressing climate change, energy efficiency, renewable energy, carbon emissions reduction, and conservation. International agreements, including participation in the Paris Agreement, 2015, guided national targets and policy development. Domestic policies encompassed energy transition, environmental regulation, sustainable transport, and public awareness campaigns. Scientific research and technological innovation contributed to energy solutions, resource management, and mitigation strategies in both urban and rural contexts. Military and security policy in 21st century Britain has reflected international engagement, counterterrorism, peacekeeping, and defense modernization. British armed forces participated in NATO operations, UN peacekeeping, and multinational coalitions addressing regional conflicts, terrorism, and humanitarian crises. Defense modernization included technological upgrades in equipment, intelligence, cyber capabilities, and logistical capacity, ensuring operational readiness and global reach. National security policy addressed threats including terrorism, organized crime, cyber attacks, and international instability, integrating domestic agencies, international partnerships, and legislative frameworks. Economic, social, and political trends in contemporary Britain have also been influenced by global financial integration, trade networks, and technological innovation. London retained prominence as a global financial center, while regional economies adapted to industrial restructuring, service sector growth, and technology-driven employment. Employment patterns shifted with growth in finance, technology, healthcare, and creative sectors, alongside the decline of traditional heavy industry. Public policy addressed regional disparities, infrastructure development, and workforce education to maintain competitiveness and social cohesion. The United Kingdom's constitutional framework continues to adapt to political, economic, and regional pressures. The monarchy remains ceremonial. Parliament exercises legislative authority, and the judiciary ensures the rule of law. Devolution, regional governance, and constitutional negotiation have evolved to accommodate Scottish, Welsh, and Northern Irish interests, while debates over federal structures, independence movements, and regional autonomy remain politically relevant. Legal and institutional frameworks continue to support democratic governance, civil rights, and public accountability. Demographic change has reshaped social structures, urban development, and cultural composition. Population growth, migration, aging populations, and urbanization have influenced policy, labor markets, and public services. Multicultural communities contribute to economic activity, social life, and cultural exchange, while integration, equality, and social cohesion remain central policy concerns. Education, public services, and civic programs aim to address social disparities, promote mobility, and foster participation in governance, labor markets, and cultural life. The 21st century has also seen the United Kingdom navigate technological, environmental, and geopolitical transformation. Participation in international organizations, trade partnerships, and diplomatic alliances shapes foreign policy and economic strategy. Domestic governance, public policy, and social institutions adapt to technological innovation, population dynamics, and environmental pressures. The evolution of digital infrastructure, scientific research, and industrial innovation supports economic competitiveness, social well-being, and global influence. By the present, Britain remains a post-industrial, globally connected nation, maintaining historical institutions while adapting to contemporary challenges. The combination of parliamentary democracy, constitutional monarchy, legal frameworks, and regional governance provides political continuity. Economic modernization, technological innovation, and integration into global markets sustain growth and influence. Social and cultural diversity shapes contemporary identity, while historical legacy informs policy, law, and public life. Britain's trajectory in the 21st century reflects adaptation to a globalized world, balancing domestic priorities with international engagement, historical continuity with modernization, and social cohesion with demographic and cultural diversity.